Runners see the city in a different way. We see the flow. Rooftops become pathways and conduits, possibilities, and routes to escape. The flow is what keeps us running, keeps us alive.
In 2008, EA DICE was looking to get away from the classic shooter genre for which they had become known for with games like Battlefield. The result was Mirror's Edge, an action-adventure game where you play as Faith, a runner who delivers packages within a dystopian society. When Robert Pope, a candidate for the upcoming town election, is murdered, with Faith's sister framed as the culprit, Faith launches her own investigation to find out who really killed Pope. Hi, my name is Devin Schwer, and in this video today I'll be conducting an interface analysis on Mirror's Edge. In this analysis I will break down all the on-screen components and how they affect the overall gameplay. Starting off, I'm going to talk about the first things a player sees when they get into the game and they open up the levels. The player is greeted to a very simple and fast and streamlined user interface. There are no buttons on the screen. The only buttons are actual objects in games such as elevator buttons or buttons to open doors. There is no physical health bar either, which is substituted for a screen perimeter that is classic in most FPS games. However, what's worth noting here is that when the player takes more damage, there is only a slight red flash, and the world more or less goes darker as Faith takes more and more damage. And this is important to work with the interface because red is a very important color in this game, which I'll highlight more upon later. And as such, it's very important that the world goes darker instead of redder, because the player can't be distracted looking for the red on the edges of the screen, where they should be looking for the red in the game to get to and to use those objects that have the highlight of red. There is also no mini-map on the screen, or map of any sorts. The only waypoints that the player can use are large objects that are hinted at during the dialogue of the game, such as the communications towers or the cranes that the player can use as a general objective to be heading in the general direction of. There is also, besides Faith's body and the environment around her, a small white dot on the center of the screen that's used to denote the center of the screen itself, and also when Faith picks up a weapon, such as a pistol, a shotgun, or a sniper rifle, this dot will turn into a small circular reticle that Faith can use to aim. And when pressing a button, the sniper will go into its classical crosshair scope. The only ability that Faith has, besides her natural athleticism, is an ability called Runner Vision, which the player can trigger periodically throughout the level and is recharged by running more. When in Runner Vision, the whole interface changes a little bit to have the entire edge of the screen have a blue hue to it. And in this, police are much more recognizable by having a light red highlight around them. This is more or less used within the game so that the player can see when a police is aiming to strike them that their weapon turns red when going to attack them. And then the player can press a button and will disarm the police officer and pick up their gun. However, I generally found that Runner Vision wasn't a very important tool to use throughout the game. It more or less was used by me to analyze the new environment when going into a new zone that had police in it, and analyze where the police were, where the exit was, and how I could get to that exit. Other than that, I found Runner Vision to contrast the fast-paced nature of the game and to be a more or less obsolete item in the later areas. Players can also press a button on their keyboard that will snap the camera to the current objective, which is an important object for the interface because Mirror's Edge has some very complex level designs within it, and it also promotes exploration as you go through the levels. And therefore it's important that when the player is done exploring, that they can press a button, have the camera snap to the objective, and that they can continue to go on their way and get through the edge of the level. Next up, I'm going to be talking about the actual items within the game itself and how they interact with the interface that Mirror's Edge has built. First off, items that are marked as red, and these items can be boxes, a pile of bricks, wood planks, ladders, pipes, they can be anything. These items are all extremely important and are used by the player to move from the beginning of the level to the end of the level. And this is a strong contradiction to past games and their interfaces where red was a symbol of danger and that they should be avoided, whereas in this game and with this interface, players are conditioned to look for the color red and to use it to their advantage and to use it in all sorts of different ways, which is a really unique concept. Red also stands out very strongly against the generally white or gray background that the game uses to signify that the city is very clean on the surface level, but gets darker and dirtier as you go on, and that as a runner you can see different parts of the city that other people can't. And so this interface also ties in strongly with the core story of the game. And even against different layers such as blue, green, or orange, this red stands out very strongly so the player can easily see it wherever they go. Police also have a lighter red ring around them, and while this red ring does denote danger, it also can denote that you can use the police and you can take their weapons to your advantage and clear out the area, allowing you to think and to breathe and to move through more efficiently. Police, when they also move to strike you, their gun turns red when the correct opportunity, when you can disarm them and take their weapon from them. Other larger objects, such as cranes or the communications towers in one of the earlier levels, are red for the entire duration of the level and not just simply when you get closer to them. And this is important because this allows players to have a general objective as they move through the level and to use them as a point of reference if they ever get lost. Both of the past points I talked about between the very simple screen and the very simple representation of objects of importance factor into a very well designed interface for the player. And I say this because it both does a great job of showing the player the important objects in the game, as well as withholding other objects and information from the player if they don't decide to explore through the levels. And I say this because while a player can follow the red objects from the beginning of the level to the end of the level and usually get carried in the most efficient fashion, there is still room to explore and room to move around within these levels due to their very complex level design. In each level there are several little packages that Faith can pick up that are only found through exploring the level and going off the beaten path of the red to really explore and get to know the level and test out their skills. There are about 40 in total of the game, and I only generally found one per level that was usually on the beaten path of the level itself. I only found one which was really through exploring and really moving around the level itself, which was in the sewerways and running around the concrete structures on top of the level. But regardless, again, this interface does a great job of both giving the player enough information to get them through the level while also hiding information from the player that they can only get to by exploring the level and not just following the string of red objects from the beginning of the level to the end. Despite the past points I've said where the interface works really well and it does a really good job of directing the player from A to B in the most efficient manner possible, there are some points where this interface can confuse and disorient the player and kind of leave them high and dry, especially in some high danger profiles. The first scenario this can happen in is when there is a general lack of red. And this happens in generally two parts of the levels. The beginning of the level where the player is just allowed to explore and run around, and during more critical parts and complex levels where the player is meant to really use their skills and everything they've learned to get through the level and get through this high danger section of the game. The first part at the beginning of the level isn't too much of a problem. It's more or less just meant for a time to explore a low stress part of the level where the player can move forward. However, where the interface can fail these players is that they can get stuck, and while they can point themselves towards the objectives with the button, it's hard to move forward when the player doesn't see any red and therefore doesn't know where to move forward, and is left kind of fumbling around until they finally find some red to move forward and progress through the level. The other part is an experience which can cause a lot more player frustration, and this is during the high conflict, high danger zones of the game. The most popular example that comes to mind when I think about this is the construction zone, where the player is trying to get to a big giant red crane on top of one of the buildings and jump between these two construction zones that go between these two buildings. During this time, the player is being shot at by an attack helicopter for most of this part of the level, and there is very few red items in this sea of blue tarp and white brick. And this can lead to a lot of player frustration because the player can waste time fumbling around, looking around, not sure where to go, and they end up getting gunned down by this attack helicopter and quickly dying. And while the big crane serves as this general marker for the player to get towards, they are still trying to navigate through the level, and after they find a little bit of red, they're just popped up to another level where they're not quite sure where to go yet. And once again can get caught out in the open and killed, leading to a lot more player frustration, and this is one of the points where the interface is weakest in the game. The second scenario where this can happen most in is where the player is kind of built into this tunnel vision of looking for red objects and moving through the game. And while this is the general goal to use the red and get through point A to point B, it can contradict this feeling of exploring and to really feel out the level and to really use your skills in parts where you can. And the player is also reinforced in this tunnel vision by very high contact scenarios where the player is simply running for their lives from either police that are in a place where they can't get to them, an attack helicopter, or just a constant stream of police coming out of different areas of the game, and therefore contradicts this other kind of feeling in the game of trying to explore. And I guess this is where the interface works too well, and where the player is too guided by the interface and by these red objects to move forward and move through the game. Wrapping up this video analysis, Mirror's Edge has a very simplistic and streamlined user interface that allows for a very uninterrupted experience of the game, and also ties in with the story element of moving quickly and efficiently. The red objects throughout the game also tie in with the story and character of seeing the city in a different color and seeing things that normal people generally wouldn't see. And this ties in with the interface of having generally plain objects such as a pile of bricks, when highlighted red, mean progression and importance and draws the player's attention to them. There are only a few scenarios in the game where the interface falls short of the player and what they need to do, and that is generally when the player is in a zone where there is a lack of red entirely, or when the player is in a high conflict zone and uses the red objects kind of as a crutch to simply move through the level quickly, and doesn't take the time to survey the surroundings and potentially look at different, maybe safer alternatives for the player, as some of these red objects take you right into the faces of the police. Overall, I hope you enjoyed this video presentation, and if you feel any other opinions, feel free to leave a comment down below, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.